I was born a crack baby. I know that might be shocking to some of you guys because most of you know me as Ebony Brown, the celebrity stylist, working with all of the stars, union costume designer for film and television, commercials on TV every single day, working with the billion-dollar brands, traveling the world, Delta One. But a lot of you guys just don't know my origin story. And it's not because I'm ashamed. I tell this story all the time. I just haven't told it online. And I've been feeling a bit of a disconnect. So we're about to change that today. Now, I'm going to warn you, it gets really crazy. My life story is really wild. And I'm just going to give you some examples of what you might hear. So you will hear about my upbringing, where there was a lot of, and I came up in the 70s in Detroit, so that was the whole epidemic of all the things. So you're going to hear a lot about that. A lot of PTSD because I actually know how crack smells. It's a very weird skill set to have, actually. You're going to hear about how I was conceived in a crack. I don't know if I can say the C word like I did in the beginning. So I'm just going to call it rack. How I was conceived in a rack transaction. My mother wanted rack, didn't have the money for rack. So she used what she could to get what she wanted, and here I am. But before we go any further, not too much on my mom, because in this series, you're going to understand, first of all, I was conceived in the 70s in Detroit. That was the epidemic for all of this, right? A lot of people who grew up in the 70s or was born in the 70s and 80s, we got it bad. My mom, her story of resilience is even more profound than mine. And she is the reason I am where I am today, why I'm an entrepreneur. I saw her going from being in rehab to being a multi-millionaire, being rich. I want you to remember how I just said beating the odds, because that is going to come up a lot in this series. Because while this story is centered around beating the odds and simply being in positions that people like, sometimes you're like, I don't know how I got here, but I know it was God who got me here. But the beating the odds point is very, very prevalent throughout this whole series. So keep that in mind. You're going to hear about my life when I was extremely poor. And I'm talking food stamps and using the oven to heat the house because there was no heat. It had been turned off, to going from that to extremely rich, and how that affects me today, because no matter how successful I am, I cannot shake the scarcity mentality. You will also hear about the time my mother was in rehab, and while she was there, I basically got shipped around to live with whichever relative could afford to take me at the time. You're going to hear about me ducking and dodging pew-pews because there's been a few times. You're going to hear about my various mugshots because there's been a few times. You're going to hear about the fact that I was born or conceived in this transactional situation, which means I don't know my biological father, which also means that I did date someone who may or may not be my brother. We still haven't figured it out. We don't want to know. You're also going to hear about how my father actually adopted me when I was 2 years old, and that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And the way his family embraced me was, sidebar, I apologize to any of my family members who are watching this and don't know that I was adopted, because it was never brought up. I was never considered a step. I was never considered anything like that. That's my dad, that's my grandma, that's my grandpa, those are my aunts and uncles, cousins. There was never any disconnect. And that was my journey to understanding, I guess, like unconditional, unwavering love and acceptance. Because I understand how some people did not have it that lucky if they were adopted into a family. You're going to hear about my journey when my mother overcame the odds, became extremely rich. We had an amazing life, and it all came crashing down when she went to federal prison for something she didn't do. We will talk about that too. But her going to prison and losing everything at the height of it all. And what's interesting about that part is, it wasn't until the moment, we had been living a certain very rich lifestyle for quite a while, but it wasn't until that moment, and I remember this, it's seared in my brain, until the moment when she said, okay, I can relax. I finally made it. I know the future that I've set up for myself, for my kids, for my family. Like anybody in the family, if you needed a car, she was buying it. If you needed a place to live, she was paying rent. No questions asked. So she had just gotten to this place where she's like, okay, I can relax. I've done a lot of work and now we can coast. And as soon as she got to that moment, it was all taken away from her in a moment's notice. And then you will hear how I was calling Reverend Al Sharpton on his cell phone almost every week, asking him to help me figure out a way to keep my mother from going to federal prison for something she did not do. You're going to hear about the attorney who literally put his life on the line to defend my family and was unalived in the process. Again, this story is really heavy, and my coping mechanism is to make jokes of things. So if you see me making a joke throughout this series, doesn't mean that I'm taking anything lightly. It's just, I think that that's how I was able to even accomplish the things that I've accomplished in life, get to where I am. It's because I had to figure out a way to cope with it, and that was through laughter. And the reason I'm doing this is because you guys hear a lot about my wins, and a lot of people celebrate their wins online or in public. But I feel like an origin story is so valuable in the art of understanding who a person is and how they got to be where they are. So I will be dropping at least 5 episodes today because I don't want to drag this out. I'm doing it on the weekend because I don't even post normal content on the weekend. So I'm trying to get it over with. But stay tuned because this is about to get juicy.